Welcome to ReWorking Rhythms as part of Dance Umbrella Festival 2023, across London and online, from the 6th to the 31st of October. My name is Freddie Opoku-Adair, Artistic Director and Chief Executive at Dance Umbrella. First, I'm going to introduce our BSL interpreters, Erin, who's now signing, and Ali, who's now sitting over there. Live captioning link is in the YouTube description for those of us who are online. My descriptions are middle-aged, black male, with a short back and sides haircut, wearing a black jumper, with a boomerang kind of shape in a rainbow color. This event is the DNA of Dance Umbrella. Last year, we had Europe Beyond Access with the British Council, which is about mobility of disabled artists across Europe. So this is not just another trend for Dance Umbrella, and it's really important that these conversations happen, because it's not just about the equity of the art form, but it's also about the sustainability of artists, the arts, and also generally human beings. The work in rhythms is not realistic. This work is not possible without collaboration. And it's been amazing to work with independent dance. Thank you, Hale, who is now exiting, or just exited, co-director. And now we have Nathaniel Parchment, co-director, as well as Nikki Tomlinson. It's been an absolute pleasure to work with you, and I know this is only the beginning of new conversations we're going to continue. Also, as partner, we have Team London Bridge, Ellie Beedham, Director of Arts, and it's been a pleasure once again to work with you. Team London Bridge, if you don't know about the work they do, is across from Tower Bridge all the way through to London Bridge. So you can see the work they do with all the organizations, corporate businesses, arts, community centers. Really do check out the work they do. This conversation also started, which I like to mention, Stopgap. You can also see the work as part of Dance Umbrella Festival on our digital platform. This work is also integral to Dance Umbrella and what we're trying to do, be accessible. That means in person across our global city, as well as online. And this is the perfect example of that. This work, or this event, is being live streamed right now. So those of you, our global audiences, wherever you are, welcome. This work is also important as part of our collaboration with Big Pulse Dance Alliance. This is a European network of 11 dance festivals, specifically supporting artists to upscale their work, mobilize the work across Europe. I know what you're thinking. Well, the UK are not in Europe anymore. We will continue to collaborate, whether we're in it or not. And that's exactly what arts does, and that's what we continue to do. We have in the room our visiting artists, which is an exchange program of artists from our European partners coming to the festival, and us doing the same exchange in artists as well. We also have in the room a delegates with Fabric, which the CEO, Paul Russ, an artistic director, has invited delegates from all across Europe and internationally to be also in this space. So internationalism continues and will continue beyond these shores. And it's great to have all of you here. I'm now going to hand over to Nathaniel Parchment, co-director of Independent Dance.
Thanks, Freddie. Good afternoon. Hi, yes, I am Nathaniel Parchment, the extremely new co-director of Independent Dance, following on from Hale. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Independent Dance for those of you who are not aware of what we do. Led by artists since 1984, ID supports the development of dance through radical inquiry, learning, community building, and audience engagement. Our public program supports a wide range of accessible and interdisciplinary approaches to dance, somatic practices, improvisation, and choreography. Our aim is to generate a diverse and dynamic community of practice which is not limited to one place or location, and to agitate for positive change and justice within independent dance, the arts, and society. Therefore, hopefully, this talk is a part of that contribution. As such, IDEA is a think tank, a hub for research, a meeting and learning ground, and a base for artists across generations. It's considered a home organisation and a reference point by a wide community across the UK and internationally. I will take this time to describe myself. I am a mixed Caucasian and Jamaican male. I am about 5'7". I've got a lot of dark brown curly hair. I have brown skin, and I'm wearing a kind of a red, white, and blue striped shirt and some dark trousers. On behalf of IDEA, I'd also like to thank Dance Umbrella as an amazing partner, and also Team London Bridge for helping make this happen, as well as our fabulous partners, Siobhan Davies Studios. I'd like to just make everybody aware that they are being recorded, and that this talk will be available on Dance Umbrella's digital pass, and also later on Independent Dance's digital library online. We will hear from the panel first, and then everybody will have a chance to ask questions, and also those of you tuning in online, you will also be able to ask questions, and some of those will be read out. So introducing our panel, first up we have Raquel Meseguer Zafe. Raquel identifies as disabled, works with rest and horizontality as creative impulses, and acknowledges CRIP, there'll be more about that later, as a tool in her artistic process. Raquel has recently been funded to conduct research into more nuanced ways to remove barriers and create integrated spaces where disabled people feel they belong and can thrive and do their best work. Moving on, we have Sho Shibata. Hi, Sho. Sho worked at Arts Council England South East and joined Stopgap Dance Company in 2008 to manage touring, outreach, and dance development projects. And they continued with Stopgap as the company's executive producer in 2012. Next up, we have Xan. Hi, Xan. Xan is interested in creating dance that can be encountered in ways beyond the visual. Dance as vibration that can be heard and felt, as well as seen. They're interested in framing dance as dialogue, as acts of listening and responding, something we can engage with through multiple senses. Dance Art Journal says, what is clear is that the spaces, whether physical or virtual, Xan is opening up through their creativity are necessary, and their commitment to bringing in a wider variety of bodies and experiences beyond neurodivergence is reflecting their allegiance to intersectional learning as the way forwards. And last but most certainly not least, bear with me, we have Tarik Elmoutawakil. Tarik is an artist, producer, and community organizer, co-founding Marlborough Productions in 2009. He was responsible for programming the Marlborough Pub and Theatre award-winning Brighton Fringe programme for 10 years. In 2018, Tarik created Brownton Abbey, an evolving international performance collective, centering and celebrating disabled queer people of colour whose events investigate and reclaim traditions of ritual and spirituality from within these marginalised intersectional communities. Tarik continues to work internationally, contributing to an ongoing movement to reshape access and leadership, while seeking to demystify cultural production, remove barriers for, and encourage engagement amongst underrepresented people. And so I will hand over to Tarik. Thank you.
Hi everybody, I'm Tarik. Hi, nice to meet you. Also see you all. And hello everybody at home. Really delighted to be here today to facilitate this conversation, which I think will be juicy. There should be lots to, I think, get out of it. We have an excellent panel here. The way that I like to host panels is to keep them a little bit cash, just feel a little bit like it's people chatting at home. So nothing too theoretical or too exclusive. It should feel open to everybody. If anyone is a bit confused, put your hand up and ask. We're all in the living room together. I should do a visual description, shouldn't I? So I am a brown person with a beret on, a brown beret. I am wearing sort of pinstriped black and white top and pleather pleated green flares, and also some jewelry. Most of all, it is indigenous North African Berber stuff, Meseguer stuff, my own culture, giving off some magical indigeneity. That's my description. Should we do a little group of descriptions here?
So Xan speaking. I am a white, non-binary person. I'm slim. I have a brown mullet and bluish, greyish eyes. I'm wearing a turquoise t-shirt and dark pinstripe trousers and orange socks.
Okay. I'm Sho. I am an East Asian man in his 40s. I have short black hair with peppers of white and a beard and round glasses. Today I'm wearing a blue shirt with grey t-shirt and blue trousers.
Hi, I'm Raquel. I'm a Spanish-Filipino woman in my late 40s. I've got long curly hair and I'm wearing a check shirt and a yellow Greenpeace Resist t-shirt, which felt appropriate for today.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, so today the subject of the day is ReWorking Rhythms. As it's described online, or in the event title as using the idea of rhythm as a lens, this panel will be exploring how working practices in the arts can and should better reflect the conflicting needs of society. We'll be discussing what that means to us individually, in our work, in our practices, and maybe also just outside in our general lives, how it might, how this thinking is not just something that we apply to our work. So I feel like maybe we can start with I've got ADHD, by the way, so I could have planned, but I didn't plan. But I also thought that that was part of ReWorking Rhythms. And what I've learned with facilitating for myself is that I like to just go with what feels right in the moment. So just FYI, if you're thinking, has this guy planned anything at all? No, not really, he hasn't. And he didn't need to. I have done a little bit. But, you know. So we're going to kind of figure it out in the moment. I think we should start with just sort of how this, as a subject, feels to each of us. Why it's interesting to us, or maybe how it applies to your work. Just a bit of an introduction for our own individual access points to the subject. Does that sound all right? Mm-hmm. Anyone want to begin? Raquel.
Me? Okay.
Yeah.
So I think about time a lot, and what I'd love to do first is do a bit of myth busting about time. There is no universal time. Like science tells us that we all exist, even Sho and I sitting right next to each other, in slightly different space-times, which I find very freeing. So that's one little myth. The other is that we kind of experience time as some kind of natural progression, in a way that doesn't notice its construction, and it is constructed very much, constructed in and with ideas of able-mindedness and able-bodiedness. So thinking about schedules, calendars, the time that we assume a task might take, whether it's like getting ready to leave the house or make a piece, all those things are very much constructed and mitigated by our culture's ideas of able-bodiedness and compulsory able-bodiedness and able-mindedness. And that CAFA, and I could reel off some academics, but I'll try to not do that. But if you are interested, come and ask me later. So what I like about that is that if it's constructed, it can be deconstructed. And so I try to create processes that really honor the needs of the artists, often the disabled artists and chronically ill artists involved, which are long-form residencies, thinking about really different schedules, like how can we make something that really cares for the body, minds in the room and doesn't force. Alison Kafer says that crip time is like, rather than making bodies bend to the clock, it's bending the clock to our bodies. So that's a little way in from me.
Thank you. Since we've mentioned crip time, why don't we talk just briefly what that means, crip time. We can all add into that, but crip.
Add something to, so my understanding of crip time, I guess we're using crip as a verb here, to crip. Oh, I've got to be careful of my mic. So I guess that's about unpicking assumptions and norms in the structures and systems that are disabling. But yeah, the main kind of anchor in how I think of crip time is around it takes the time that it takes. It's like the really important phrase for me.
I will also say that crip time comes from, the term I assume comes from crip theory, and crip theory, and write this line quickly, is a blurring or merging of queer theory and critical disability studies. So that kind of already an intersectional thinking, or mindset, or practice, or something in that way of thinking. That's crip theory, crip time, and yeah, that brings us back into, hopefully we have a bit of an understanding what crip time could mean. So, what is this panel, why is it interesting to you?
Yeah, sure. So I think as a producer of an inclusive dance company that's been touring for a number of years, and also developing talent right the way from grassroots to leadership positions, I think we have always been quite curious and challenged, I suppose, in terms of how quickly things need to move, And I think particularly for underrepresented people, when the sector really wants something done, or an individual to come through, either as artists or leaders, there is a sense of quite urgency. And I think what I've come to understand, having been working with Stopgap since 2008, is that it takes a lot longer for these positions and these aspirations to be filled, because there are so few opportunities out there that are suitable and paced at the right time for individuals. And you need more patience, you need more investment, you need more equity for those people to come through to what people kind of need in the sector. And I think I've always been that person in between, bridging the gap of sort of persuading how things have been done in a traditional way or historic way to what these individuals who they want to have those aspirations, to fulfill those aspirations need. So it's always been a bit of a balancing act. And I think, having observed the changes in the last 10, 15 years, I think the sector is getting it. And I think it's really nice to see people like the Arts Council respecting and starting to understand that, although of course there's a lot more work to be done. And I think recently, particularly why this topic interested me is because in the last 12 months, 18 months, StopGap has also been thinking about how we can make dance accessible to a wide range of people. So we're known for having diverse people on stage, but we haven't always had diverse people in auditoriums. So we wanted to go through deeper inquiry about audio description, how captioning works as a result of that, how we can create relaxed environments in a mid-scale context. And we knew it was going to be a big task, but it's bigger than we thought. You know, we are co-designing how dance could be deconstructed and reconstructed with a sample audience with lived experience. So we have deaf people, visually impaired people, neurodivergent people coming in to give us feedback throughout the creation process and what works and what doesn't work. And in order to try and accommodate all of their preferences also actually requires a lot more time. And what we also found is that if you change one little thing, then everything else needs to change. So that again takes a lot longer. So whereas we thought, well, maybe we could kind of get it done in 12 months, 18 months, no, it's probably going to be a 2-year process. And I suppose as I mean, there's a lot of things that we're finding out as we go through the creation process. And I think my job as a producer is to speak with prospective audiences and prospective venues and funders to kind of get them to understand why things take longer when you really, really take care of inclusion and diversity. Yeah, so time does need to swap around, doesn't it? And right next to black hole, there is no time.
There is no time. I mean, I do want to say something about, like, crip time isn't always just things taking longer. It's also, like, about the particular lived experience of disabled people's experiences of time and those qualities. So it's about attention, intention, scale, counterpoint. It's about the quality of that time and how that can then inform the work in its content and in its form and in how it meets the audience. I just want to make sure it has, you know, artistic qualities as well as kind of practical considerations, and it's also a lens with which to kind of challenge and look at normative time and compulsory able-bodiedness and able-mindedness and critique it. It's a lens.
Thank you. Xan, what does ReWorking Rhythms mean to you?
Well, I'm coming from the big focus of my year has been a project called Stimming, which has been sort of the project that has been my entry point into dance. And then kind of, for me, it's been a research project about how can I explore my access needs within dance and how can I approach dance in a way that feels good for me in my neurodivergent body-mind. And I guess there was something that Raquel said about like these assumed or normative understandings of time that I know, like I came to dance feeling like I was late to the party. I was in my mid-20s and was also just getting to know that I was neurodivergent and trying to understand what that meant. And I guess there was a sense that playing catch-up for someone who's such a slow learner was not going to be something that was going to be rewarding or rich for me in any way. So I think right from the get-go, I decided to resist that norm of kind of let's enter dance and play the game as I was kind of understanding that the industry or whatever the normative culture was demanding. And so I thought, okay, I think I've got to go into me and why I am feeling this call to a movement practice, and what does movement practice create space for? And that led to this very rich exploration of kind of why the movements that my body loves, knowing that I move to self-regulate. And those movements are kind of associated with stimming, this word that is used for self-stimulating movement or self-regulatory movements. And so I started to explore kind of how dance can offer a space for me to self-regulate and how that could be a creative thing as well as a therapeutic thing. And kind of feeling that it was important to put this work into creative spaces as well. Yeah, I feel like I've spoken a lot.
Did that feel like it was a big amount of time?
It did feel like it was a big amount of time. It probably wasn't, yeah.
'Cause time isn't relative, and I think it's useful sometimes to acknowledge how the feeling of time, as you were saying before, might be different from where I'm feeling it and for you, and the different pressures. You know, when you're queuing at the supermarket and you're in a rush and you're at the checkout, not the self-checkout, you're at the checkout, and it feels like loads of time has gone by. It might have only been a minute because you're in a rush. And, there's different ways, I think, when I notice how 1 minute in one space can feel like it's taking up this space and somewhere else it doesn't. And I think that is especially, for me, that's particularly interesting or poignant because of my own identity and the identities of the people that I work with who are often marginalized in multiple ways. And I think the experience of being marginalized is one that kind of tells you that you are further back, not enough. In some way, you've got to catch up. And I think when you're a queer person or a person of color, a disabled person, there are many different ways in which we can be marginalized, refugees. There's endless ways that we might not be in the center. And I think when you're not in the center, and I think probably no one is really in the center ultimately, but the further you are from the center, the further is a pressure for you to catch up. And what happens when you're trying to catch up? I think a lot of the time you miss things, perhaps, or if you're rushing, I often find when I'm rushing, I might be leaving other parts of myself behind. I've learned now not to rush. I came here to this event yesterday, not to this venue. I haven't been here sitting in the dark. But I arrived in London from Brighton yesterday, knowing that I would arrive with a different appreciation of time, and I'd be able to kind of just be more present, and I wasn't in sort of a different time zone. So I think we've all given a little bit of a brief intro into why this is interesting to us. But I've got some questions already. Sho, I wanted to ask you about urgency and the sector. Or this. I think often there's this. I've definitely noticed an upsurge in interest in marginalized people. This is great. We're going to be in the arts more. But they want us now. They want us yesterday. They want us yesterday, and they're rushing us. There's an urgency, and I wonder about this, how that is detrimental actually to the work, and then what happens to those artists who've been rushed. You don't have to answer that specific question. That's not a question. It's a kind of a statement. What does that say to you?
Yeah. I mean, I think.
Or anyone.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's very tempting for people to jump in when the pressure's on and perhaps they're not ready or don't feel ready. And I think it's a collective responsibility of that person's colleagues and also the sector to be understanding of the individual journey that those people who are put under pressure have gone through, and then to, really engage in a dialogue about the right moment or the right pathway. I mean, that person might be ready, we don't know, and every individual have the right to say, I think I'm ready, let's go for it. But at the same time, I think, as you mentioned, Tarik, I think as a marginalized individual, the pressures double in some ways, and that might just be an internalized thing. But, you know, like you sometimes feel like you are carrying the flag for, I don't know, in my case, East Asian people, or, you know, disabled communities, et cetera, et cetera. And I think there's that kind of extra pressure that comes on top. And knowing that also that you haven't had the same level of privileges in certain contexts and in your past lives, you do have that kind of imposter syndrome that you also have to manage. And yeah, so I think yes, I think you're right that, you know, it's welcome to have that desire from the sector, but I think we also all need to be very honest about which individual and how and when. That it's a lot more complex than in each case.
I think one thing that I took away from, because I was moving into kind of creating performance work at a scale that I'd never worked at before this year, and kind of reflecting on that process, one thing that I want to move forward with, and was finding kind of ways to do it through that process, was the importance of kind of being very honest about where you are in the process. And I know with my performance practice, it's still research to me. So I think there's a lot around, even though I want and need audiences, because I'm kind of in a similar position of, like, some of my big inquiries now are about how to share spaces with audiences in a way that is going to accommodate a diversity of needs and experiences in the room. That's still something that's being explored for me. So I think there's something about, like, how to move forward into performance, keeping with this quality of research, and finding the language for that feels really important. So that, I guess, there's something about me feeling safe with audiences, but also wanting audiences to feel safe, and that being about finding the language and frameworks for that.
I like what you said about honesty. I think that's a really important note. I think being honest with yourself as well, how certain processes are pressuring either yourself or your body, and what we're maybe ignoring signals or signs from our body or our mind-body system. What things are we not being honest about with ourselves? And if we're not honest with ourselves, how can we be honest with others as well? And I think that's the same for producers, for audiences, for everyone, I think, in this ecosystem, is to have a bit more honesty, I think.
It's hard not to feel the urgency, though, and to be true to what's important and what feels urgent. Because normally, if something's urgent, it's urgent for someone else. It's not really urgent for you. That's where the pressure comes from. I have a diary that reminds me that, like, every day. Hard not to jump on it. Being honest, hard not to jump on it.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And where does that urgency normally come from then?
I mean, it's timescales and opportunities that are structured in a particular way, and we need structure, right? But I guess where there's not an opportunity to revisit what that structure might look like, given if you want to work with people who maybe exist in a different temporality, in a crip kind of temporality, or a different dramaturgical temporality. I'm just riffing on the word temporality now, so somebody else take over.
I'm just thinking about, I think a lot of the time, structures are top down, and time is passed from top to bottom. And so, the urgency often it might come from a funder who has no connection really to the people in the room. And it doesn't, a lot of the time, kind of makes no difference to them. From my experience, I think there's a lot of things that we as people have to deal with that are set up by systems created maybe a couple of hundred years ago in a kind of colonial time. And like whether it's a charity status and setup or what a charity has to do and say and when it has to report by. And then, so then charity has to give its annual reports by a certain time. Money needs to be spent by a certain time. Or we've got a bit of money that needs to be spent by a certain time. And we haven't given it to any disabled people. Quick, we need that right now. Mm-hmm. I think that can often be an experience that can happen. And unfortunately, that ends up being in the lap of the artist to either push back against, to articulate why that doesn't work, to hope that maybe that money can still exist with in a different time. Sometimes it can't. That's the fact of it. And I think there's the difficulty sometimes between the new world that you want to live in and the one that is an old world that still kind of has a lot of power over us today.
I guess it feels like sometimes we might be in a position to be able to kind of use or work with time as care in the way that we make timelines and budgets. And then sometimes we have to work with what's given, but I think in those times it's probably, that's when it's really important to think about, well, what's possible within that time, or what's generous within that time for me, what's caring.
I think we should spend a bit of time. We've got about, I reckon, 15 minutes before we move on to questions. And one of the ways that I like to host a conversation is to delve into the problems and the challenges, and then to source the solutions so that we don't leave here going, oh, it's really hard. Time. So I think we could still spend a little bit more on challenges, maybe a few minutes on other challenges, or actually it's up to you, really. Maybe you're ready in your solutions. Maybe we want to go into how you approach things. Let's leave it smooth. We can do both at the same time. So challenges and ways around how you found to navigate and how you've found ways of reworking rhythms. Branding.
All right, I'll kick off something. So one of the R&Ds that I did was on a piece called Someone Should Start Laughing, and we were working with participants who all have chronic illness, creating these performative conversations between someone who has chronic illness and an audience member. And so we created what we thought would be an accessible schedule, which was to work on a Monday and a Tuesday for 4 hours, have Wednesday off, and work Thursday and Friday for 4 hours. So a really kind of reduced schedule in terms of what we normally plan for dance. And I guess this is an example of letting crip time and rest and care into the room, was that our rehearsal space was basically a big resting space with a bed and yoga mats and all this kind of thing. And that became the sharing space, the space that we invited an audience into. So we invited an audience into our crip space, our temporality, the things we needed. And then to disrupt the kind of normative, what you might expect to encounter in a 40-minute sharing of a dance theatre piece, we had a collective rest about 12 minutes in, which was like, I know you probably want us to keep, to get going, but actually we need to rest now. And that was the most powerful part of the whole research, was this collective moment of rest, maybe when the audience didn't expect it. So I guess that's an example of some practical things, but also the letting the poetics of crip time and rest and care and into the work.
I think that's a really great point. I have definitely noticed in the arts, when you put your access requirements into the art, as in like, this is part of the creativity, it's not just a requirement, it's actually the creative nature of it, the creative fabric of it. At that point, arts organizations or like producers, whatever, I think have a bit more of a, I don't know, it makes it a bit easier to kind of go, oh, we can't mess with that bit then. I think sometimes there's, there's little things you have to erode, but when it's, so within Brownton Abbey, for example, it's all disabled folks in the well, everyone is POC and disabled, and sometimes people have asked if I can have some white disabled folk on the stage, and that just isn't what Brownton Abbey is about. We love white disabled folk in the audience, absolutely, and it's makes sure it's a really accessible space, but it's about POC, disabled folk on the stage. And only because that's written into the art and part of the creative fabric, I think it was what gave me the strength to know I wouldn't erode that part. So I think sometimes how you hold on to things is by really working it into the fabric of it.
It's that classic thing of it being an add-on, which then can come with urgency. And if it's really important, it's there from the beginning. Right?
Yeah.
And it's integrated from the beginning in the values and in the aesthetic of the work and the process.
Because there is sometimes maybe even more of an importance to not disrupt the art than there is to not disrupt the artist, I think. Maybe I feel like sometimes the art is more inherently sort of like, you mustn't disturb this.
Right, okay.
That's what I've experienced
given
anyway.
more respect than the artist as a person.
And so if you need to keep as an artist, keep that respect. I mean, really, you deserve it as an artist. But another layer of maybe protection can be to make sure that's in the art as well, I would say. But you deserve it as an artist, whether or not it's in the art, just to say.
Yeah, I guess I've also been exploring ways to rest in the work, in the dance work, through really leaning into repetition, and that being a sort of a brain rest, so that I'm not constantly thinking of, what do I have to do now? And I've been quite curious about how that might feel for the audience in terms of, like, what if they get bored? Because I'm not really doing anything new for a while, and I'm kind of, like, the practice that I've been working with has really been staying in something, staying in a rhythm, and not pushing myself out to kind of physical extremes or. And I guess that for me has been resisting the idea that the only way to be with an audience is to, like, captivate them, and always be offering something new. And I think a lot about newness and time and sort of resisting the need to always be producing something new. And actually, something I'm really interested in that sitting in the rest and repetition is kind of, I think it can be a space to meet yourself as an audience, or maybe to lose yourself and daydream, or I'm really curious about what happens in that space.
It makes me think that dance in some ways is an incredibly ableist dance form in terms of what we think of as virtuosity and skill and technique and disciplining of the body. I don't have anything else to say.
I guess it focuses on what it can do rather than what it can't do.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess what you're doing there, Xan, and other colleagues of ours, is to question what we take to be virtuosity and why. Like, why do we expect that? Or why do we really privilege that, or kind of want to serve up that particular rhythm or dynamic or aesthetic, or, and maybe what are we missing by doing that?
I'm thinking about an artist called Joe Bannon, who talks about crip virtuosity as being things that are, I guess, similarly, like how I can understand it is how I'm connecting to this kind of stimming body, the things that I know my body can do and is innately knowledgeable about, I suppose,
Yeah, and I think the questioning of traditional concepts in dance is very much something our co-artistic directors also quite regularly question and check and that transpires in what happens in studio too. And I think it's really interesting to have works that are quite opposite those things, and like it might be slow, and you might worry that it might be, the pace of it might bore audiences, but really, I mean, like in some ways, like because people are starting to, or have been starting to get tired of this kind of on-demand culture for a long time now, I think offering something that is kind of counterintuitive to that, I think, is a real blessing in some, and I think it's the role of programmers and producers to kind of identify how works like that might benefit or fit in within the overall program that's on offer. Because if you, I'm going to be a bit business, but like there will always be a market. You can find the market, and as an institution, you can build a program where you take risks on some, but still have the sort of the big money earners. And then it's about the balancing of your overall program to explore and to give space. And you just need an understanding colleagues around you to be able to kind of voice the value of reworking rhythms, I think.
Value, money, capitalism.
Sorry, folks.
Boo.
We've got to work with the system
to
change it. Yeah.
This is it. It's a system that exists. We live in it. We're swimming in it. How do we get to the shore so we can walk out of capitalism and not be affected by this feeling that we're going to, I don't know, drown if we don't swim quickly out of the water? Ways out of money, any suggestions? Any ways around that? I mean, as you're saying, valuing is one thing, I think. So we have more of a value so that there is more resource putting into the need for that time by saying, actually, this is going to take an extra year, and that's an extra year of money for all of these people. I hope that's something that, because there's money out there, isn't there? That's another thing, is knowing that the money is out there. And a lot of the time, it's how we articulate things.
Does it always come down to money, or is it about like culture, attitudes? Because sometimes, sometimes if I'm working with an organisation, it's not necessarily the amount of money they're putting into the residency, but it's I don't feel like the culture overall is really embracing what I might be. Yeah, I think that it's not just money.
Yeah, I think
it
you're
is money,
right.
but it's not just
money is not the only thing.
Yeah.
The culture says, I want this yesterday, that would be the efficient thing. It's interesting. I was thinking earlier today about it's definitely, we do know culturally, like we know from the story of the tortoise and the hare, we learn quite young going slowly is a way to do things, and you can win by going slow, but somehow, I don't know if things have got, I feel maybe even more over time as we've got I think over time we've got even more aware of time. We have phones, like watches and things, always reminding us about every single second that is going by. I wonder if maybe over time we've also, as a culture, become even more obsessed with maybe how little time we have, as we become more aware of this thing, and it's also been shaped in a certain way, as you said, because actually time isn't. When I think we talk about crip time, we haven't talked about black time. That's also a thing. Queer time is a thing. I just recognize that the marginalized experience has not always, but can have a different approach to time. I also recognize that for actual practical reasons that it can take longer. There might have been extra things in your way. I'm wondering about giving some time for this question. You noticed. I'm not rushing myself. I think we should still stick to some of our creative solutions. I like this. Unless there's anything particular that you all feel is coming through for you at the moment that needs to be said.
I kind of want to mention some of the brilliant projects out there that are really resisting the drive for capitalism. So there's Tricia Hersey's Rest is Resistance, which is resisting grind culture, and specifically working with rest as reparations, for a racist system. There's a phenomena in China called Tanping. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, apologies, which is about lying flat, and it's younger Chinese people deciding not to go for the really long hours and the kind of pace. And there's this movement that started in 2022 in Nigeria, which is called Soft Life, which was Nigerian women refusing to again follow a particular pace and prioritizing self-care, radical well-being over other things. So there are these really interesting pushbacks. And I'm sure there are those things within our industry too, with the people we know who are working with rest, who are working with quick time, who,
Black Power Naps is one that...
Yes, yes.
Is one, and the Nap Ministry, another one.
Yeah.
I think there's that thing of pushing back against this idea of being lazy as well, isn't it? That's often a thing, again, put on marginalised people. And a deep fear within us that maybe we are lazy.
Yeah.
What a joy. I really like to lean into sometimes, like, maybe I'm being lazy, great. I'm going to practice that so I get really good at it. Any tips for organisations or artists on how we can rework rhythms?
I did a lot of learning from a dance artist called Claire Cunningham. This summer I went on a week-long workshop with Claire, and there was a real rigour in our practice of taking breaks and things like that, but also something that felt like if there was one word to sort of summarise that week, what we did, there was a lot of, I guess, giving permission to and finding the juiciness in waiting, and Claire's idea that waiting is not necessarily wasted time. It's quite interesting, that word wasted, I think, in relation to a lot of the other things we've been talking about.
That's beautiful. Waiting is not a waste.
One other thing I'd love to add is a concept that Jess Tom first wrote about, which is a socialist approach to energy. So this idea that rather than it being all on the individual, you as a team are kind of sharing a number of spoons that you have in the day. And Jess first wrote about it, and then a colleague called Holly Thomas that I've been working with recently takes that into the rehearsal studio as a practice of how checking in every morning and every afternoon of how we all doing, who has the capacity for what, so that you can be really, really flexible, really responsive, and really honest as a team with what you can achieve that day. So that socialist approach to energy, I think, as a shared, more horizontal structure, I think is a helpful tool.
I love that. Excellent work, Jess Tom.
Big up.
I mean, I think it's... I think the truth is that all of us are so embedded in this capitalist, ableist systems that it's so hard to get things changed and done. And I think it's even those who work to try and change that system still get pulled in the overwhelming currents of it all. And I think, there's a collective responsibility, I suppose, in all of us to try and hold that space and try and bring about that change. And it's really great that there's all these movements and projects are happening. And it's about how can we put all of this together to, keep reminding people that change is needed. I think we all know post-COVID, things are not easy right now, and the systems that have been working is quite evidently broken. So in some ways, these new ways and different ways of doing it, and redefining time and value is very much needed, I think. So yeah, I suppose the question is, how can we be collectivized? Yeah, redefinition of what we've been used to.
Yeah, the pandemic, the COVID pandemic definitely, I think, sort of gave a broader view to people who already, I think obviously a lot of disabled people already knew about time and different approaches to it, or a different, relationship with it. And I think it was definitely interesting seeing with the pandemic how, I think, a whole world, actually, almost, of people approaching time in a different way and going, oh, there's always space. And, I think it was kind of quite jarring for a lot of people at first. And if anyone else also felt that as well, like I definitely felt like I would still needed to do things for a while before I actually sort of eased into pushing back against that and recognise that it was inside myself, this internal need to keep producing or doing, and that there's not doing is also doing the thing.
I feel like I can zoom in on my dance practice, kind of reflecting on this thing of collective experience, knowing that we also are trying as a panel to not always do that. So, but it feels like it's what I have to say about this. So I have been really interested in how rhythm can be this space of connection where we meet each other. And I guess, so the thing that was exciting me this year was collaborating with a composer and making an offer of rhythm to a space and saying, let's all meet each other in this rhythm or with this rhythm. But there's also the part of me coming to that, thinking about this being a collective experience as one of diverse needs and experiences. And so trying to create a space where there wasn't a right way to be in the rhythm, or even a right kind of rhythm to follow, and knowing that within music, you offer a slow bass line, or there's the sort of part of the music that's riffing off and is offering sort of a more sporadic dipping in and out of rhythm. And then there's the kind of counter rhythm. We were looking at the structure of music and kind of using it to help us. But I think I guess there's something about dance itself to me that feels like it's this experience of sharing rhythm that feels, that's what draws me to it. It's really important. But the notion of like going into a dance class and being told that I'm not in the rhythm, or like feeling frustrated that I can't keep up, or so yeah, I guess that was a zooming in on this idea of rhythm and collective experience.
It's questions time, isn't it? It's over to you. Who's got a question?
Hi, we've actually got one straight away from the live stream that I wanted to put to you, which is lovely. This is from Lily Norton Show, and they would like to, they have said they really enjoyed Raquel's reminder that crip time doesn't always mean things take longer. As a neurodivergent person, sometimes things move incredibly fast and at others incredibly slowly. How do we find harmonious rhythms that allow collaboration when working with others, whilst also moving at the individual pace we need to?
Does anybody want to answer that? How do we find harmonious rhythms?
Would it be okay to hear the question being read again? I think I need a bit more processing time with it.
Absolutely, and I'm aware I'm going to speak slowly and loudly.
And I'm trying to lip read you as well.
I'll stand up. Okay, so the question is, how do we find harmonious rhythms that allow collaboration when working with others, whilst also moving at the individual pace that we need to.
I've got a suggestion.
Yeah.
One of them, I wonder if there's the physical act of bringing your rhythms together physically through practices like somatics, which I'm just starting to hear more about, but I think I understand a little bit more about. I think there are ways of regulating our bodies to be in sync also with each other and to just sort of do some work, work just to, maybe work is the wrong word actually, a practice that helps to sort of melt down this idea of time around us, just so that we're actually in our own time, I think. So if we're in a room together and we're feeling the pressure that we have to do something together, maybe we're just going to acknowledge that we might be feeling rushed. There might be some physical practices to bring our heart rate down, for example. I think there's physical things that one can do to actually change how your body is experiencing time, I believe.
Yeah. I mean, I think every rehearsal space and process can be really curated towards the needs of the people in it, and that's just got to be an ongoing conversation because, if people work in very different rhythms, the places of harmony are going to be interesting, but the places where you don't match are also probably quite interesting, and places of learning, as long as you can, manage that in a way that takes care of everybody. So it's not a very sexy answer, but I think it's chat, I think.
Like embrace the difference.
Yeah. And I
Acknowledge
think that's a very, very much an inclusive leadership style, I think, in that, if you're in a position where you're holding that space, knowing which individuals work in a certain rhythm and pace and what their needs are and what their preferences are, then from the start you can almost plan how that day is going to run or how that project's going to run. And as you say, I think it always has to be a dialogue because everyone is different every day, every hour, every minute, sometimes. So just being able to just step back and have an overview of the different rhythms is a very important way of bringing diverse people towards a common end, I think.
Well, maybe not even a common end, but like where everybody gets to make their best work.
Yeah.
I definitely feel like this is a question I have that I bring to my practice and have not got loads of answers for yet. I think it's an ongoing question. I think it does. I've had conversations, I've had some mentoring from Jess Tom, who we've talked about before recently, and we were talking about how sometimes there can be a very heavy focus on access clashes in a way that is not always so helpful or sort of, is not so caring or so I think there is something about like tuning in or finding ways to find these moments of harmony.
Great, thank you.
I was just going to say, sorry, if you have a question in the room, just give me a wave and I'll bring the microphone to you, so let me know. Yeah.
Hello. It's not really a question, it's just carrying on from the subject that you were talking about. And I was thinking about coexisting and the multiple possibilities of being, and also like in positions where you bring people together, that people can be with whatever rhythm or space, and that somehow holding that space for the complexities of difference is, for me, I don't know about the whole use of the word harmony or not harmonious doesn't really kind of, so much interest me. I'm very much interested in how people can be and states of being, and that might be rhythm, or it might be dynamics, or it might be whether people are feeling comfortable or uncomfortable. But I think it's about actually allowing a coexistence of difference. And I'm sure you know much more about that than me, possibly, but I feel like there isn't a way to, I mean, if you want to work with a rhythm, and that rhythm is specific, but if you're talking about a gathering of individuals, then the possibility for difference is huge. And I suppose it just depends what your expectations are of that gathering.
So maybe there's a managing expectations as well, or shifting expectations of what one might expect from a space.
Or desire of the individual hosting the event, or series of individuals hosting the event. Like, what is your expectation? Do you have an expectation? So I think that also needs to maybe come into the conversation. Not now, but I was just thinking about it, like coexisting in difference.
Yeah, I think expectations often dictate whether we're satisfied or not. And if we don't come with that same expectation or have shifted our expectation, the possibilities of what can happen in there, I think, are much greater.
If you don't, in a way, if you don't name it,
Yeah.
but you are holding that space as a person, inviting people, whether they're participants or people watching, you are actually deciding to hold that space for whatever occurs.
Yeah. Thank you. Do we have any more questions? We've got, 1 minute, I think. Quick question.
If you can't, hello everyone. If you can't answer this now, maybe for later, but it's actually for sure, or anyone else wants to jump in. I'm really curious about your research with audiences who have disability and kind of, widening that gap. And, for myself, working in Asia and particularly in India, there's just such a hiddenness and invisibility, even in everyday life. I think it's maybe only in the last couple of years that I've seen people with disability even just getting jobs, maybe in coffee shops or things like that. So just artists or, audiences, it's so far away. But say hosting a festival or an event or a workshop, what might be maybe just, a starting point. Yes, we can look at venue accessibility and this and that, but it's more, I think, even just a mindset for how do we make feel welcome. So I'd love any quick or longer tips as you have time.
Pass. It's a good question. Do we have time to take an answer? Is this a question that we just put out there? And that's the question. It's 15:15. Dance umbrella, independent dance, what do you say?
Yes,
Let's take our time with the answer.
I think we started 5 minutes late, so yeah.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, I think. Hi, Vanessa. I think if you're going to start, then I think you need to identify groups of people who can help you think and design your offer to make sure it's inclusive. So there must be organizations or individuals who are happy to come and talk to you, to consult you, to tell you what works and what doesn't work, and then you just got to bring them on the journey of developing your program or choosing your venue or how you do your communication and marketing, etc., etc. So it allows you to kind of reconstruct everything to make sure that it meets the needs of these different individuals. I think co-design is kind of a big word now. I think that it's kind of very important for being inclusive. But yeah, I don't know.
Nothing about us without us.
Yeah.
That's it.
Nothing about us without us. That kind of,
And if you can, pay people for their
Oh, yes.
consultancy,
Yes.
because that is hard-won knowledge and wisdom.
Yeah, really valuing that knowledge as well. I think a lot of the time that knowledge isn't really.
We don't value it. We
Not
just
valued.
expect people to sort of tell us what they need, and that's extra labour for them. Yeah.
Yeah. Wonderful. That brings us to the end of this really juicy session. Thank you, Xan, Sho, and Raquel. Thank you, Freddie and Nathaniel, and all the other names that are falling out of my head. Thank you, everybody from Dance Umbrella Independent Dance. And thank you, audience.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tarik. Thank you, audience at home. Thank you, Instagram, or wherever we've shared this. Yeah.
You too.
Thanks.
And thank you so much, Tarik, for chairing this conversation. Thank you, Xan, Sho, and Raquel. I'd also again like to thank Dance Umbrella and Team London Bridge and Siobhan Davies Studios. I'd like to thank you, the audience here with us today, and those of you online, people who have contributed questions. Yeah, I found this afternoon's conversation, just the start of something that I really, really hope continues within ID, between organisations such as ID and Dance Umbrella, etc., and within our sector. I think it's something that is worthy of focusing on at all stages in our processes, in our relationships, in our approach to our work and our lives. And there's something really special about artists who work with the body and the human condition, who can speak in a certain way about time for the benefit of all of society. This has been great. Again, look forward to continuing the conversation and welcoming you to future talks and events. Dance Umbrella is on until the 31st of October, everybody across London and online. And I'll pass over to Freddie from Dance Umbrella.
There's a lot of thank yous, and I just want to say a quick thank you to Independent Dance for working with us. It's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you guys. It's been Ali, Erin, thank you very much as well, BSL interpreters, and those of you across the world, wherever you are, thank you for also being here. And also, talking about rhythms, you can get another rhythm of Stopgap because they've got to work on our digital platform. Yes, I'm plugging. Plug away. Yes, I do plug. Here's another rhythm. You can see 2 works that was commissioned by Stopgap. That's on our online digital platform. So get your digital pass right now. Seriously, you can take out your phones and get it now. Yes. No, thank you, ID. Heni, thank you. Nikki, Nathaniel, Ellie, thank you. And I just want to thank all the team, George, behind, working live, streaming, Andy, our technical. I mean, these events is a whole production. And we are reworking a rhythm right now, so it's not just a talk, it's a show. Yeah, so thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you.